This week on the Notorious Scoundrels podcast.
I joke with my friends who play CIS. I say, automation took our jobs because the B1s are basically better Z6s.
Yep.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a podcast focused on tactics and competitive play for Star Wars Legion. Hosted by Kyle Dornbos, Michael Barry, and David Zelenka, with Jay Shalansky, the man behind the glass.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I am here with David and Jay. How you guys doing?
Doing great, man.
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on again.
Of course. So Mike is actually on vacation, possibly building a lightsaber on some kind of vision quest. I don't know. I hope he's having fun. But we're gonna have. Is this the second week in a row, Jay? Because I was gone last week, right?
Yes. Yep.
Awesome. So we're going to actually talk about some things that are near and dear to your heart today anyway, so this seems highly appropriate. That being heavies, and by that I mean...
I'm looking forward to it.
By that I mean, things in the heavy slot.
That still sounds so bad. What are you trying to say, Kyle?
No,
what are you trying to say?
Yeah, that Jay, he's a chaser.
Think of like WWE, WWF, like heavyweight, worldwide heavyweight championship, whenever I use that term. So yeah, we're going to talk about vehicles, heavy vehicles, and but first we're going to talk to Brendon Franz, the High Marshal, the man of many titles, head judge, TO. Let's launch right into that first.
Welcome to In the News.
And we're back with the illustrious Brendon Franz. So you're not like the High Marshal anymore. What do we call you these days?
Man, birthday boy today. But for our listeners who might not be tuning in on January 6th, the official term is head judge now, or tournament organizer, depending on the day. Sometimes both, but forever.
Quarterly podcast host.
Quarterly podcast host.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's fun. We are still doing Critical X. We have broken up about as many times as we have episodes, I think, but we're still going strong. Almost at a 1-year anniversary, actually. So
you guys are like an 80s rock band?
Yeah, something like that. We got our one-hit wonders every couple of years, and then we'll live off the revenue from that for a little while.
So you first of all, happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you have a T-shirt yet that says "I have spoken"?
No, but I want one really bad. That is like the ultimate judge meme right there. I will make it legal was great, but Mandalorian is just the meme center of the universe right now. And I don't even know how to handle a Friday without like my baby Yoda. It's bad. Got my withdrawals, man. I binged it again over Christmas.
Yeah, I've watched that opening scene of episode 8 with the Scout Troopers and IG-11 like 6 times. So
as a veteran NCO of the United States Air Force, I will tell you that is exactly what active duty is like. Cannot confirm or deny punching babies in a bag, but like everything else that's active duty. Just sitting around. Oh, the commander just like called everybody in for a random drug screening on a Sunday. Yeah, no, I'm out on leave. Sorry, can't go. Like, just for real, like random garbage. That's active duty life right there.
Including the horribly inaccurate pistols, which I think we need to adjust the double black dice. On those.
Oh my gosh, yeah. The Scout Troopers were not shown in good light in that one. But,
so let's get on topic here.
What? Not used to that.
So we are here to talk about Legion, and more specifically, at least for right now, Prime Championships.
Hey, I ran one of those this past weekend.
Yeah, so can you talk about, since these are new, they're distinctly different from RPQs, can you talk just a little bit about A, how they're different from RPQs, and B, like what things organizers should watch out for when putting together a prime?
Yeah, definitely. In the last year, and I think this is where we're still in that transition phase, people are kind of getting used to the new terms. So even just the RPQ prime changeover is confusing. But as of the new floor rules document, they're no longer using the the relaxed, the formal, and the premier terms. It's now either casual or competitive. There's only two tiers. So you guys running a Saturday tournament at your store, even just like with the regular tournament kit or your own prize support, that's a casual event. These primes are determined to be competitive. And in that box, which I gave FFG some feedback. I wish that document would come out sooner to TOs so that they could start reading it and preparing it. I think that would have helped me. It is very, very clear in there how you're supposed to run it. It even has a minimum number of players listed. There's no what if you don't get enough listed, which I think is a great question for the FFG team to answer. Maybe if we can get a response from them. But it says, follow the advanced structure in the tournament regulations. So in the Legion tournament regulations, which are in all the documents on the Legion page, one of the last pages is, if you have this many players, run this many rounds, and because it's an advanced structure, run a cut, and it tells you how to have a cut. And in every case that we're going to deal with a prime, it's going to be a cut for a top two. I think you have to have 94 players or something like that to have a cut for a top four. But so for ours, we had 19 players. We ran 3 rounds, and we had a cut for the top two afterwards. And that was again based on scoring, and then after that, strength of schedule and extended strength of schedule. We actually had one undefeated player who was 3-0, who didn't make the cut because of strength of schedule and ESOS. And I know you guys have some opinions on that sort of a situation yourselves. So, it was definitely it was a situation, to be sure.
Yeah, it's we of course, as you said, have our own opinions about tie breaks. I actually as far as tie breaks go, I personally prefer strength of schedule over other things like MOV. I do think it's disappointing that FFG had a chance to kind of like reorganize the prime structure in a way that potentially eliminated tie breaks entirely, and instead they still have a situation where you're mandated to do an SOS cut, which is a little unfortunate. I know 2-day primes are not feasible for all stores, but like our store is doing our store is actually doing a 2-day tournament to make sure that they're not cutting anyone undefeated.
I like it. The struggle there and direct impact, I could tell you my store prime would have had is I would have lost a player from San Diego, and I would have lost a player from Albuquerque, New Mexico, who ended up being the guy who won it. So I know of at least 2 people who wouldn't have made it because of that, and who knows other schedules too, wives and lives and other business. But you're right, like Legion, it's not X-Wing where we can crank out 6 to 8 rounds in a day. That's just never going to happen. We're looking at the Adepticon schedule, right? It's 4 rounds in a day, and it's a 14-hour day, which I'm really hoping I can shrink by moving people quickly. But so that's definitely, the round structure is a priority. The other one that's really clear in there is that I know for a number of RPQs, either the tournament organizer or one of the judges was a player. And I know that several different events did that, and that was okay because that was the type of tier that a Rally Point qualifier was. But with this being a competitive event, it very plainly says in bold text, leaders are not allowed to be participants in this. So if you're out there and you've got somebody you were planning on having kind of back you up on the rules, you can't do that. You can't have a judge in the game. And the danger of that. And I think it's a good question, right? Like, well, what if I do it anyway, right? And so yeah, it's not illegal if you don't get caught, but it kind of invalidates the integrity of the event. When you're not following the instructions that the company's given us.
What is your
Well,
opinion? Sorry, Jay. Before we leave this, what is your opinion on a judge substituting in for a player who dropped if that drop makes the situation uneven? Because I've seen that happen multiple times.
In a casual tournament, I'll do it any day of the week.
Right.
If we have somebody who comes in and I have 9 players, I will totally grab my army and I will play, and then that way we don't have a bye, and then I will be the bye in a casual tournament. Unfortunately, for a competitive tier event, and it says it just plain as day, you're gonna have a bye and somebody's gonna get it. And so I had one player who left, they went home. It was like a 3-hour break, or no, it was like a 4-hour break because we also had lunch. And so I just did my best to give him a rough idea of when to be back. Turned out I was wrong, and he was about 15-20 minutes late. And so I gave that particular game a time extension, but they ended up not using it. They actually were done before time even got called. So, just one of those, like, I had the power and I had the ability to do. I would never want to do a 20-minute time extension.
So there is no leeway here, right? There is no leeway. Really.
No, the document's real clear.
Okay.
Leaders are not to participate.
All right.
I personally love it. There has been a couple tournaments that I've either been streaming or been at. None of yours, Brendon, but where the judge played in the tournament, and I hated it. I hated every second of it because a couple of reasons. One, I need you to be focused on me. Like, if I'm playing and I need your help, like, I need you to be snappy with coming over and answering my judge question, number one. And number two, I don't see how maybe in your scenario it's different because he's just filling in, but in the ones I've seen, they're like registered to play the event while they're judging. Like, how can you be fair in that instance, especially in your own games? Who's the backup there? Who, you know what I mean? And then, I have to play the judge. Like, I don't like it at all. I don't, on any level. I think judges are judges and players are players, and that's how it should be. And that's how it is in Magic and everything. You know what I mean? That's how it is in all the other games too. Like, that's how it should be.
And I feel like this will be a little more painless once stores develop their Legion scenes a little bit more fully. I know, like, one of the reasons that this is presently an issue is that a lot of stores don't have like staff that really know Legion. So the tournaments are essentially like player run tournaments. Which means
I actually heard a similar one where, like, the store, short of like putting the pairings up, had no other knowledge of the game, and the players like had to have a collective tribal leadership run their event or whatever. And I don't remember if that was a prime or just a regular tournament, but I was just like, wow, that's, I mean, good on them for making do with whatever they had, but it just blows my mind, to know that an event could be run that way.
Yeah, and I think it's, especially if you have a community where it's like the first, invite tournament of the year, you probably have most local players don't themselves have invites. So if you're a local player and you want to help run the tournament because the store is not capable of doing it themselves, you have to essentially say, like, I'm gonna remove myself. I'm going to sign up to still be here all day, but I'm also going to remove myself from the possibility of competing in this tournament and getting, some kind of reward. So at least presently in the space where we are, where a lot of stores don't have like institutional Legion knowledge like they would for other games, I can see this being an issue at some stores. But like you said, there's no leeway in the floor rules or in the prime rules. And I do agree with Jay. Like, it's, in any sort of competitive tier event, it's really awkward to have a judge participating in any capacity.
Yeah. And I even, it seems silly, but I was actually talking with FFG earlier today and just confirming. I was like, how hard of a line in the sand is this? And they said it's an absolute line in the sand. It's not to happen. And so they are serious. They were serious enough to put it in the document, and they want it. That's how they want it to be run. You know.
Yep, it definitely makes sense from an event integrity perspective. It just creates, potentially some logistical challenges.
So I think the ask there is because I know, especially where I am, our communities are a little bit smaller, and so our local store doesn't take Legion as seriously as they probably should, and we don't get primes at our local store. We have to travel like an hour and a half away. But what I guess the question here is, so they're making these bylaws for these stores, and so I think a lot of like smaller stores aren't going to have the capability to make this happen. So then does the ask come to the community for volunteers to say, hey, I know I wanted to be part of this prime, but we need a judge that can sit here and judge this for the store? And then how do we reward those people for doing that instead of playing, right?
Yeah. Well, so and I I won't get into all the details, but there are judge promos in that kit. You don't get everything. You don't get the trophy. You don't get the coin or anything like that, and you don't get the command tokens and stuff. But as far as the cards go, there's usually a set that's set aside for the person running the event, and so that's they're not completely going, hey, thanks for running this, but we're not going to give you anything. They put promos in there for you. So and it specifically tells you in the inventory, like, this is what is set aside for you. So there is an advantage to giving your Saturday to help other people have a good time, and that's nice.
All right, so I think the second thing we want to talk about related to primes is there was a prime this past weekend where I'm sure some people have seen this already, but the result was essentially decided by a coin flip.
Yep.
So you've already sort of done some research on this and even gotten something back from FFG. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
And
Sure.
and when you do that, Brendon, can we give a little context to the situation just so for people who
Oh,
don't know what
absolutely.
happened? Thank you.
Absolutely. So this situation, I'm very familiar with it, and this is one of those situations where if you miss any of the details, you're going to look at it and you're going to be like, "This is absolutely inappropriate. This is collusion, and this is a problem." And so, I think the story here of what happened is most important. So, um, again, there was a cut for top two. So the top two players have they've been decided based on the number of rounds, and then these two players have to play for first place. So at this point, rank 3 through the end of the list is completely locked in. Everybody has been given their prizes, and it's all been distributed. There's no adjustment here. And so one of the things that you guys I didn't elaborate either there, is in the Prime kit, it very clearly spells it out. If the number one winner already has a invite to World Championships, it is to be given to the next person in line. That is spelled out in text in that document. So in this case, one of the two players had an invite to Worlds already, and the other player did not. So we knew 100% which player was taking home the World's invite. And then after that, looking at the prize support, it was a difference of, I think the store had chipped in $100 gift card for first place, and I think an $85 gift card for second place. So $15 store credit is the difference there. And then neither player was looking at the box of minis, which is pretty cool, but a lot of people have army cases, and so they weren't terribly wowed by that. So ultimately, when they looked at it, they were like, we're going to spend another 3 hours after we've already been here for over like around 12 hours. We're going to spend another 3 hours to figure out who gets $15 on a coin flip. And realistically, one player very much wanted to go and use hashtag best part of X-Wing weekend. which is for us Legion guys. It's the after party. It's we spent all day rolling dice. We want to go hang out with our friends. And this was a person who had traveled quite a ways and was a former local to the area. So they had friends. They wanted to meet up with people while they were still in town. And then the other individual, I happen to know, without getting into personal details, had some young kids and wanted to tuck them into bed at bedtime like they normally do. Neither player here wanted to play the final game, and they knew what the end result was going to be prize-wise. And so basically both players were ready to concede, and both players were ready to walk away and just take their prize support and go home. And the situation here was, well, we still have to put a winner in the books or whatever. And so at this point, after they've both decided they don't want to play, they both have reasons to be somewhere else. They flipped a coin to decide who was going to concede, and that was it. And so where people get real hot is that the floor rules document very much says that arbitrarily resolving a game is considered collusion and is a disqualification. And so there's definitely a party out there of people who feel that this was inappropriate and that adjudication should happen. I looked at this really heavily. I consulted not just with my own opinions on the matter. I've consulted with other people who are outside our community who are big tournament leaders themselves in other games, because sometimes having perspective is nice. And I have, thankfully, a support group of other people I know that I can get information. And again, they looked at this situation and they said, no, with what was at stake here, right? The world's invite wasn't going anywhere. Nobody was getting that. The other line that I saw in the floor rules doc that really stuck out to me is that there was no distinct advantage. There was no gain, and no other players outside of these two players' rankings were affected. So it didn't devalue the integrity of the tournament, and it didn't change that up in a way that was unfair to others. I think the way that they did it maybe was not the best. I think, like somebody should have just said, I concede and call it a day. So I don't think that necessarily that was appropriate, but I don't think it warrants a disqualification in this case.
Did you actually talk to FFG about this at all?
I did. And I spelled it out. And again, the initial reaction was, isn't a coin flip really spelled out in the doc? And I said it is, but here's the details. After I kind of brought it up briefly and kind of opened the door. Once I spelled the whole detail out, FFG said, nope, this is a situation where, like I said, it maybe was not the best way for them to do this. And I wouldn't encourage anyone to do this in the future. But two players who know the results, and the prize support is so, not impactful, right? The decision is kind of, it's not important. I don't want to say it's not important. That's not right.
Too late.
Right. It's the carrot on the stick is not big enough. Is that a good metaphor there?
Okay, but I'd like to back it up a little bit.
Go for it. Hit me.
So because you knew the results minus $15,
right,
of what was going to happen, right? So no matter what, the one person, whether win or lose, they were going to get the invite. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. I've been waffling since I've known about this back and forth. And of course we've chatted about it internally, but like at first I was like, I don't care. Like, like I was just like, who cares? Sounds great. But now that I think about it a little bit more, it's kind of one of those like, hey, if we don't uphold the rules, like even things we think are small, what else is going to get, what else can happen where people are going to be like, well, sure, it says that, but we kind of wanted to do it this way. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, because I'm sure that there are players who would have played that out, and I'm sure a lot of people are upset by that. And so I think I see both sides of the coin. And
I
Nice.
see what you did there.
I laughed at my own
You
joke.
got
I'm
to
such
put
a nerd.
you got to put a rim shot drop in there, Jay, afterwards.
Brandon, I have a question.
Yeah,
So
what's
we
up?
know that 2 players went to cut and 1 player was undefeated by SOS. Am I correct in believing that all 3 of those players had invites?
All 3 did.
So
And I actually happen to know that even rank 4 wouldn't have been able to attend. So it would have gone to rank 5.
okay.
If in a hypothetical situation where that would happen, it would have gone to rank 5.
Okay, so the invite was not at
So-
stake. Okay,
Right.
just wanted to make sure that was clear.
If I may, we're going to test your hypothetical situation this weekend. So the prime I'm going to on Saturday, there is 5 people who already have invites that are all going to this prime. And so there's potential if those people all take top 5 that the could pass down to 6 to
It
6th
could.
place.
I actually talked about this on the most recent episode of Critical X, so like 2 or 3 months ago. And that's, that's where I was kind of making a case against trickle down, just to be honest. And it's that whole, do you want to go to Worlds on a 6th place invite? I mean,
I think most people would say yes.
I think so, yeah, because people want to play.
Yeah.
But when you talk about the glory of the situation, right? I think it's a lot cooler to be able to say you won your invite winning 1st place.
I think so. I think the trouble comes in, the prime I'm going to, like, there's a lot of really high end players that are going to be there, especially the ones that have their invites. So I think even a 6th place winner there would they still went through a gauntlet just to get to 6th place, so I think it all depends. It's a very tricky situation. I think it's a weird combo between having like these local stores having this quote unquote power of an invite without kind of the I guess they just have this document to go off of, right? They don't have any other backing or support to like move to like follow these rules and to do what this says. They paid the money for the kit.
That's not a cheap kit, by the way.
Right.
Like, I won't tell you the number, but it's not a cheap kit.
Right. And they're expecting to get a certain number of people to offset that cost, plus selling stuff. And then they got a bunch of these guys that are like arguing about, who got the 1st place or whatever in their store. And so I could see where it just gets really dicey as far as the lines, because there's no, like, FFG's the authority, but there's no and I put that in air quotes. You couldn't see that in podcast land, but
well, and so let me show you the other side of the coin then, if I may. David and Kyle, how would you feel if you won your Worlds invite in June and for the rest of the year you weren't able to compete in any competitive events for the rest of the year because you already have your invite?
That would suck. I mean,
it would suck a lot, right? Wouldn't it?
I mean, I get why invites passing down is a thing.
I have no issue with the invite passing down.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And I say that as a guy who kind of defends not trickling it down, but I also see the other side of the coin. I'm not blind, right? And you don't want to be that guy that burned the invite, right?
We also don't want to incentivize groups of players who already have invites to mob tournaments and block people out.
Right. Yeah, because that's not cool.
No.
Well, and so I was actually in that boat. I got my invite. What was it, April or May?
And you might have been like one of the first ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like before I knew, that they didn't burn, like I was like, well, I can't go, I don't want to screw anybody, so I'm not going to go. I can't go to any more tournaments, you know what I mean? And then we found out obviously that I was wrong, but it was a weird place to be in because I was like, who do I play?
Right.
Right. Are you going to be a submariner and like just hang out and try and get middle of the pack prizes?
I got mine in June, which is funny that you mentioned the month of June. So that literally happened to me. So.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So and then you wouldn't have been able to go and compete at Gen Con and
correct.
That
would have been horrible.
Yeah.
So
it's a weird. I think, we sometimes, well, on my podcast anyways, we rag on FFG a little bit about the mistakes they make, but I just don't know that there's a ton of like silver bullets in this. I think it's just like they're making the best of what they can. Sure, there's a couple things, Kyle, like you mentioned earlier, that they could have done better as far as taking out SOS, but I think the structure of how they're doing things it is fine, and there's some tweaks that we can make here and there, but I don't know that it's necessarily wrong.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have a situation where you're talking about like an invitational tournament that happens once a year, and then invites to that tournament are at stake kind of throughout the year, like there's not really a good way to do that, and also continue to create incentives for players to participate in multiple tournaments. So I think this is probably the best we'll get, which is fine. As far as invites passing are concerned, I do want to go real quick back to the coin flipping thing, and just sort of play devil's advocate briefly. And as far as like the floor was calling out, random results being collusion, like I personally can't think of a situation where you would end up with two players agreeing to randomize a result if one of them cared about it, if that makes sense. I guess I'm struggling to see like what situation that sentence or that wording is designed to address that does not involve both players not caring whether they end up, one or two.
Yeah. So, and there was an example in there, and I apologize. Let me see if I can pull it up quickly.
It has something to do with both players knowing they will make the cut, and so they agree to resolve their game without playing it.
Right, because they're both going to make it.
And so they use a non-game means to decide. Basically, they try to decide a game of X-Wing Legion by some non-X-Wing or Legion means. X-Wing is where this comes from because this is where this cropped up originally. There's actually an infamous incident in X-Wing where you had like 8 people intentionally draw or something silly like that. I don't know all the details, but
well, and then I think that's also where the final salvo rule came in, which I'm not entirely familiar with, but I guess that's a mechanic.
It's going to require more research before I say any more about that.
Sure. And I like this one here. Player A and player B are friends. Player A is already going to advance to day 2, so we're talking about the future of the same tournament. But player B needs one more win to do so. After discussing it with each other, player A offers to concede so that player B can also advance, and player B agrees. As soon as there's a discussion, the integrity of the game has been lost. Player A is allowed to concede the game at any time, but should do so without soliciting the concession. And so in this case, in our coin flip situation for Legion here, it's my understanding that the TO needed to put in a win or a loss, and so he needed a result for the record book, and because there are no draws in Legion, we need a win, right? So I think that's where that happened, because both players were equally ready to walk away from the table at that point.
Now, this is not as important as I'm going to make it sound, but I have a question, Brandon. Did they discuss the money? Did they discuss who got it? Did they flip for $15? Is what I'm trying to ask.
I believe that might have been part of this conversation.
Okay.
But I don't think that either of them particularly cared.
Okay. Well, as a judge, we might care.
Yeah.
The game itself might care, because that could lead in future circumstances to a bribery sort of thing where it's like, let me concede to you and then I'll give you half my prize pool, because that's bribery.
Right. In this case, the person who won the coin flip did win the. Right. I believe the winner took the winner prizes, I guess is what I'm saying. Both of them wanted to walk away though. So
they truly didn't care. All right.
Yeah. It was, and I think, again, I think it was done not the best. And I think that it shouldn't be done that way in the future. And I think it's a learning opportunity, but I don't feel like it's something to penalize at this point in the moment. if that makes sense.
David, it's interesting. Like, that's a real interesting train of thought on that. And I'm starting to lean more towards the I don't like this side now with thinking about that, because I think that really jeopardizes the integrity of the future. Maybe not this one in particular, but yeah, I don't like it. I like it less and less. And I've never been in a match where even like casually, where we both wanted to concede at the same time. Like, it's always like one person's like, all right, man, you got this, and then the other person's like, you sure? And yep, and then that's it, and we walk away, right? And so it seems an odd situation, but I think it definitely opens the door for a lot of interesting questions. And David, what you're saying is very interesting. Not that there's been a ton of money on the line in Legion yet, but who knows, right? Like, I mean, look at Magic, look at Warhammer. Like, there is potential for this game to get there, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I think that becomes
something we have to
a
think
real
about.
issue. Yeah,
the section right above collusion is bribery, and that is specifically spelled out in that category. So it wasn't a I'll concede if I get the money, or I'll concede if I whatever. It was just, we both want to go home and we need to put a record in the book.
So let me ask you this: how does FFG or the community, how does this stuff get enforced? So we got this document, it's sent to these stores, they have it. How do we enforce this? What happens if I'm at a store and something nefarious happens? What are my answers?
I mean, I think the best thing we can do is try to educate and not come across like a-holes. And that can be difficult when you're the guy trying to point out the rules. I know I've encountered it when I try and point out floor rules items, like, say, an Obi-Wan that's giving the middle finger instead of pointing. And I say, hey, this is cool, but it might not be appropriate for organized play.
You said we wouldn't bring that up in public, Brendon. What? Why?
Hey, I'm going to call you out, man.
I just kidding.
But, and so sometimes it's not fun to be the guy pointing out the rules. And believe me, after this weekend, I've sure seen it. I've seen comments of expletive TO, and various other things. But at the same time, I've also seen people who said, once they saw who the TO was for the event, that they immediately stopped being concerned about the issue and knew that it was handled okay. So I think there's both sides of that, and I think ultimately our job as a community and as community content creators is to get the right information out there and to be available if people have questions. And when people want to know how to do things right, or even if they seem like they're going to make a misstep, step in and politely say, hey, you can do that, but you might be putting yourself at risk. I mean, the reality of the situation is, and I heard this in my store at my event when I was running it, was, ultimately, Brendon has to follow the instructions in the document, because if he doesn't, then the store is in jeopardy of potentially not getting a future event, and Brendon is potentially in jeopardy of not getting called to run another event. The reason that I run these events is because I follow the instructions and I do it the way that FFG wants me to do it. When you go rogue and when you do things that are not their way, you don't get the prize support kits, and you don't get called to the big leagues. So, but at its worst, I think that's ultimately what you look at. It might not impact that event, but it could definitely impact your future events. And they call that out in a different degree when they talk about judges selling prize support. Just because you're given something as a judge, you're explicitly prohibited from reselling it. So there's that in that document too. So, hey, volunteer to judge, but don't sell your stuff, so that's, the long-term result is probably the larger impact, I think. The reality is we could still have bumps in the road.
Yeah. And, the prime structure is still new too. So we're going to see, there's going to be some growing pains. Do you have, all right. Well, thanks, man. And happy birthday. We won't keep you from whatever birthday celebration we're keeping you from any longer. So,
hey, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. And
thank you, Brendon.
So that was Brendon Franz. talking about Prime Championships and some recent drama. And yeah, takeaway for me is people don't, if you want to leave and it's getting near the end of a Prime, just say I concede and leave. Don't talk about it with your opponent.
Right.
Like
Well, and that's, he brought that thing up about friends too, like the example they put in the rule book. Like, dude, if you're like 1-1 or 1-2 and you're playing your friend, like, don't talk to him about it. Just concede if you want him to like move forward or what, you know what I mean? Like, do not talk about it. No one talk. Just concede if you don't want to play anymore.
Yeah, just the first thing you should say to your opponent if you don't want to play anymore when you show up to the table is I concede.
Yeah.
And then talk about whatever you want after that.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about heavy vehicles.
Ooh.
Vehicles in the heavy slot.
Let's go exploring with Notorious Scoundrels.
So Jay, you've been running not one but two heavies recently.
Yeah, this is true. I think, I don't think the tank was ever necessarily bad. I think it just got, I think we put it aside, right? Like, because the new toys came for Christmas. And so we put our old toys up on the shelf and we started playing with our new toys. And I've always liked the tank. And I think, even with the errata of the backwards move thing, I think it's still really, really good. And so I decided recently, you know what, I want to play with the tank again. And then I was kind of looking and I was like, what would happen if I ran a tank and an ATST? And they are pretty choice in today's world. There's not a lot of impact floating around currently. There's a lot of crit machines, I suppose, but there's not a lot of impact. So they're very good. Question mark. I think they're really good. I think they're versatile. I think you put them down on the table, your opponent is thinking about how they're going to face these behemoths, right? Because the ATST is 12 wounds and the tank is 8, and it's just like, how am I going to get through this?
Well, and it's worth talking about too, that heavies and vehicles in general, at least armored vehicles, are at least defensively pretty decent against the two current big bads in the meta, that being short troopers and tauntauns. In the former case, they don't have explicit impact like the DLT does, so they're crit fishing, which is a little bit unreliable. They do have like because they have that critical 1 gun and 8 dice and usually a free aim token, they do have like a 90-something% chance to get at least 1 crit. So functionally, it's going to be the same as a DLT most of the time. But short troopers have those big meaty dice pools with all those black dice in them and those aim tokens, and often also a surge token. So even if you're getting like 1 to 2 crits shooting a heavy, you're probably still throwing away 4 to 5 hits that you could be using against another target.
And you're exposing yourself, right? Like to make that shot, because the tank and the ATST with the right configurations have the same range, if not a little bit further range than some of your dice pools. So you're exposing yourself to get a shot off for maybe 2 hits, right? And with the tank, it's rolling red defense dice, so there's like a 50% chance for shields, and so like I'm maybe taking 1 after all that work, and you just put yourself in a bad position.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like it's not like shores and or mortars can't kill vehicles. They're just not efficient targets for them.
Right.
And then tauntauns, obviously they have ram, which is free crits. But A, they have to get to melee to do that. And B, if they're in melee with your vehicles, they're not engaged, which means, of course, that you can still shoot them. Yep. So, they don't have that safety net that they would usually have when burying themselves in trooper units. So
it's also a lot harder to maintain cover when you have a vehicle that you're trying to, snap into in melee. it's a lot tougher. Although sometimes you can use the enemy vehicle as cover if they've positioned it in such a manner that you can snuggle up to the side. But at the same time, it's very difficult to actually hide your second tauntaun out of sight because you have to be in base with this thing if it's legal to do so.
Well, and with all the heavies too, their bases are bigger, and so I found that they're really good at plugging some of those alleyways that the tauntauns are running through, right, to try to get to your back line. And you're like, especially the tank, because its movement speed, even though it's one that oblong base, like it goes crazy further than you think it's going to. So like a speed, like a tank that takes 2 move actions can all of a sudden be like plugging an alleyway that, you know, you as a tauntaun player were prepared to run down, and now there's a tank in your way. Yeah, it's crazy base.
Yeah, and you can even, I mean, you were talking about doing things like running over mines to block line of sight to them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, and like, okay, so I think like part of what's going on is as I'm playing with them, I'm trying to. I think before when I played with the vehicles, it was more like, oh, these guys shoot, you know, 8, 9 dice, and that's a huge dice pool, and it's generally, you know, the tank is one short of a triple rainbow, and then if you use the twin blaster with the ATST, you got the triple rainbow at range 3. And so, you know, it's interesting, because I used to just think of them as these like firepower, but now like with the tons and the way the Shores and Bosk and everybody are working, it's interesting to use them more to like block out stuff and block out objectives and just keep your opponent from getting to those objectives, you know, versus yes, you're trying to delete units, but you're also using them as these like, you know, as linebackers basically. And I know that's a word we've used in the past on both podcasts, but they're true like, you know, linebackers. Like, okay, I'm going to come in and I'm going to plug all the holes in the offensive line here so that the defense can't get through and sack my quarterback.
They also have a pretty big influence on objectives that are, you know, a physical place on the board. So, for example, recover the supplies where you have that central box. You kind of just laugh and say, okay, fine, walk into me, I dare you. You know, I'm going to take my big gun, I'm going to aim into the center box, and if you try, you will die.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. And then, you know, when you look at fleshing out the rest of the list, especially with the price reduction, the cost reduction on the ATST a few months ago, it's not as bad.
Yeah, they're
You know?
actually, you can actually take you're saying you can get to 10x, you do what the rebels do and you drop all the heavies.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So you got to really think about it and figure out where your firepower is coming from, which is generally the ATST and the tank, and then try to fill in some spots here and there. And you know, I talk on my podcast a lot about like trying to create an all comers list. And when you're building a list, you're really thinking about you know, can I face ATRTs? Can I face Toms? Can I face Luke? Can I face Sabine? Can I face Vader? Like whatever, you know, whatever's out there that I could potentially face, what are my options with this list? And, you know, I think heavies can kind of fill a lot of those, like check a lot of those boxes for each unit, you know, like sure, Luke moves up fast, and when he gets in melee with a heavy, he can do some damage, but really he's still got to get up there. The ATST can see over a lot of terrain, and can still, you know, sure, he'll be in heavy cover if Luke's running up, but, you know, you're still going to get some shots before he even gets up there. And you can block him or the Tons out from like coming in and hitting your core units with the ATST that's got a ton of health points. And, you know, I mean, what Luke's got impact 2 and then Pierce 2.
Yeah.
You know,
And
so maybe right. And so maybe he's going to do 3, maybe 4 damage. You know what I mean? And 2 will definitely get through. But with an ATST that hasn't taken any or maybe very little damage, tying Luke up, maybe not as bad, because then you can kick him and then shoot something else, you know? So there's a lot of versatility there with the heavies.
Right, and that long base and the large base in the case of the ST comes into play, and I'm going to give some good free advice that I'm going to regret. If you are playing a tank or an ATST and you see Luke Skywalker coming for you, back up. He actually can't get to you again without putting himself in mortal danger, because if he forces the charge, his ass is in the wind. He's dead. So just back up, and then you're safe, essentially.
Yeah, I mean they can move
Yeah,
faster than you can.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah, I would say, that in general, with all these like notched based units, Tauntauns, ATRTs, the heavies, reversing and backing up is really important to remember. Like that's something you can do as a player. Like because I was playing Taunts, I don't know, a week or two ago, and I was like, oh, I could just back up. Like like it just dawned on me. I don't know, you know what I mean? And like I was like, oh, what am I gonna do here? How am I gonna get around to the? I'm like, oh yeah, I could just go backwards.
Yeah, the best is when you make like that. You make like a hard reverse, and then you pivot 90 in the same direction before you move again, and you can basically just turn around 180 and go a different direction.
Yeah, and like the tank has reposition,
Right.
so you're going to be able to move before or after that speed 1 movement. So it's you have a lot of versatility there. From a movement, you can go backwards, forwards. I'm really in love with them right now, and there you go, everybody. You can have that.
This whole segment's like a love letter to heavy weapon to heavy vehicles.
Well, and it's that thing again where I think we're at a point in the game, and again, I think once the new stuff hits, whenever that's going to be, we're all going to be able to reassess lists again. Like I don't think there's a ton that's off the table out there. I think there's some for sure, but I think for the most part, there's a lot of lists out there that could, and units that could play vital roles in the wars to come.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as the Saber comes out, I'm on that stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the AAT and the Saber. I don't know if the Rebel Z6 is on that list, Jay, but
not the way you guys have been talking. No.
Yeah. Well,
isn't it funny how one mini can go from like a must take to like it's got leper's disease or something? Like everybody's got to stay away from it.
I joke with my friends who play CIS. I say, automation took our jobs because the B1s are basically better Z6s.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh man.
More wounds, cheaper. It just the metaphor fits perfectly.
Hey, they have one less black dice. Come on. Yeah. It's anyway, we're not talking about the Z6 on this episode. We kind of did that already, but yeah, I think the Rebel heavies too, particularly T-47. I've always loved the T-47 thematically. It's like the first thing that I painted, and I was so excited about it. And then I put it on the table, and it was so bad. But it's possible that it's still bad. But I think Evan has talked about this on your cast, Jay. I think there's a place for it, at least in Rebel on Rebel matchups. Where the lack of Pierce on a unit that costs as much as it doesn't hurt you as much. And, if you're talking about like a Tauntaun matchup, Tauntauns can't really do anything to it. They're throwing 4 non-surging dice with their range attacks, so they're crit fishing with 4 dice. They can't melee it. Most Tauntaun lists are kind of constructed on Tauntauns and Leia and a bunch of naked troopers and snipers, and none of those things are really good against the T-47. So that T-47 can kind of get around to that weak underbelly of the Tauntaun list, and go after those spare activations, the naked troopers, the snipers, R2 when he comes out. It can get back there and do some stuff. It remains to be seen whether that function is worth, you still have to pay 140 points for it. But like you can, with as much value as you're getting out of tauntauns and also potentially out of rotaries, like you can build lists with 3 tauntauns, 3 snipers, 3 naked core troopers, a commander, and a T-47.
Yeah.
You can do the same thing with 3 rotaries instead of 3 tauntauns. I've been messing around in my head with like Luke Skywalker, some snipers, some naked core troopers, some rotaries, and a T-47, and it gets to 11 activations.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's any good, but I think it's, there's nothing in that list besides the snipers, if they can get to them, that tauntauns like are really good at killing. Now, maybe that doesn't matter because there's also very few things in that list that can score like trooper-based objectives, unfortunately.
Right.
So
that's the downside.
Right. So maybe it's a little bit of a double silver bullet, so to speak. But I think it's interesting. I might throw my T-47 on the table just to see it on the table and play around with it a little bit. But
well, and I had painted the tank in the ATST, and so maybe selfishly somewhere I was like, I gotta get these back on the table because I spent a lot of time working on these.
I took my T-47 out of the foam, and there was like a layer of dust on it, and I had to like blow it off with compressed air before I put it on the table. That's how long it's been since I put this miniature on the table. I mean, over a year actually, and I put it on, and it was okay. I mean, I played against clones, which is not a great matchup for them because clones have high damage resistance, and so T-47 cannons are they kind of get laughed off by clones with surges and things like that. But it was a fun unit. It was really cool because I just decided to hunt bark speeders the entire match. And so we had kind of a repulsor vehicle battle going on. But no, I mean maybe my dice were bad, but 3 red with no surge and 3 black with no surge, like 5 hits is not uncommon, but so is only 3. And 3 hits with heavy cover plus whatever dodges, especially against clones with their dodge sharing, it's like, man, this is doing no damage for the points I paid for it. So I guess it really depends. It's matchup dependent, right? As you were saying, Kyle, with the whole like you need to have the targets that actually will succumb to the damage and become vulnerable because of the T-47's maneuverability.
Well, and I think we're in a unique place with the T-47 and the Imperial heavies, where the way the lists are coming out and how things are now, that before they were kind of like the centerpiece of your army, where like if you took a T-47 or an ATST, that's what you took, and you were kind of focused on keeping that alive and making sure that did all the heavy lifting for you. Where now I feel like we're in a place where they're more of just an additional tool in your tool set versus like the only hammer you own and you're hitting everything with a hammer, right?
That's what tauntauns are.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one giant hammer.
Yep. Very large, anyway. Very cheap hammer. Yeah. And we'll see. I think that the ATST and the tank are probably in a better spot than the T-47. At least as far as like across different matchups are concerned. But I do think the T-47 has some use in specifically like against the current tauntaun style, where they just do 3 taunts and then a bunch of cheap squishy activations in your backfield.
No, we can't leave this discussion without talking about the X-34 as well.
What's that? Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I mean, it's the clown car. It's the land speeder with all those people hanging out of it.
What did you call it, Kyle? A pickup truck?
It's a technical.
The technical, yeah.
It's a pickup truck it's a space pickup truck with a gun on the back.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a little different because even though it's classified as a heavy, it doesn't have true armor, and it also, unlike the T-47, is on the ground and can be charged by tauntauns.
Yeah. Very sad for it because it's, melee denies its cover, armor 2 doesn't do anything against 5 to 7 hits with ram,
Right.
doesn't do jack against that. So it's just going to get, for lack of a better word, clapped by the first tauntaun it runs into.
Well, and even like Shores, the massive hit pools that Shores are putting out are not wasted against something that doesn't, that has a numeric armor value.
Right. Also true.
Like I've with Shores, I've killed a X-34 like full to dead in just 2 shots.
Yikes.
It was actually like a stress test for my Palp list to see if I could handle like an all rebel vehicles thing, and I just did Shores aim shoot with target for the first shot, and I did like 4 wounds on the first shot, and then just pulled the strings and finished it off immediately in 2 shots. And it's like, you're not going to be able to do that against an ATST, but you can definitely do that against an X-34.
Right. And the worst part is to get the good dice pool, you start to pay Luke levels of points. Like the good build in my book is 155. So I mean, okay, maybe not Luke, Sabine. And so then it's like, why am I not running Sabine? Or why am I not running a naked airspeeder? Or an airspeeder with link targeting array for 145?
Right. And I think the difference on the Imperial side is there's precious few things that have the versatility of those heavies, especially with Tons out and Shores out, that can handle everything the heavies can handle at that same price point. Where because we've talked about Luke or Sabine, they're kind of Swiss Army knives where they could serve different purposes, but like the land speeder, it's just got like 1 or 2 purposes. Where I think those ATST and the tank kind of have that Swiss Army knife in a different way, kind of feel where they can do 5-6 different things versus like 1 or 2 things.
Right.
Well,
and as a competitive focused podcast, we're all about making those good purchases with our points. And so we have to like say, is this a quality purchase? And I think the answer in the current climate is no. Especially when you have to compare it to something like Sabine, who's fast, can interact with more objectives, shoots 2 targets, can pierce. There's all kinds of good things for much, much, much cheaper than the kitted land speeder.
Much easier to hide.
Right.
Yeah, way easier to hide. Has a 3-up save. By that I mean red defense dice with surge. Sorry, that's my Warhammer slipped in there.
Not obligated to move forward.
Yeah, not obligated to move forward. No compulsory move.
Which, can we talk about that real quick? Because I have a soapbox about compulsory moves.
Go on. Okay. I want to hear it.
I feel like it's supposed to be an advantage, and it's not. I feel like compulsory moves are typically a disadvantage. Because
they become an advantage when you get damaged.
That's true.
So it's an extra action, right?
Yeah.
But it also means like it's a forced action, and it's also at full speed, which for these like speeder bikes and the T-47 is speed 3, and for the X-34 it's speed 2, which is far, right? Like it's legitimately difficult to keep them near your army. And one of the reasons that tauntauns are so good is because if you don't want to move them away from your army or advance with them or attack something, like you don't have to, right? Like they're super fast, but you're not obligated to use that speed at all. Like points trading is super important at the competitive level, and part of points trading is keeping units from getting exposed. And when you're forced to move a unit forward every turn, like it's much harder to keep that thing from getting exposed, I guess, is the TLDR, if you will. I just learned that acronym, by the way.
Yeah, you're right. I now that I'm thinking about it, because it's, well, and Kyle, knowing your play style, right, it's a thing that's out of your control, so there's nothing you can do. It just has to happen, and you need to figure out how to deal with that, right? And where all this other stuff, like the heavies that we started the conversation with, if I don't want to move them, I don't move them. They just stay where they are. And so, yeah, you're right. I think it is a huge disadvantage where maybe originally it was meant to be an advantage. But
and usually,
I don't know how you would design that any other way.
Yeah, and usually, like in practice, like it's an extra action, right? But usually that extra action for a unit like that is an aim action. right? Because you're going to compulsory move, aim, shoot. And other vehicles can get that free aim action by paying 5 points for link targeting array. So, for like an ATST, you can pay 5 points for link targeting array and get all the benefits of having a compulsory move essentially without any of the downsides, right?
Yeah.
Because you can still move forward if you want. You still get your free aim token, which substitutes for your aim action, and then you can still attack. Like you can still do 3 things essentially with an ATST. You're just not obligated to.
Yep.
Or you could, with link targeting, right, actually just sit there, take an aim action, end up with 2 aim tokens, and then attack, which is not something that, I mean, obviously repulsor vehicles can also take link targeting array. But I guess my point is like, any vehicle can pay 5 points for an extra action. But that extra action is optional, essentially.
Whereas they can do it without exposing themselves to additional damage.
Right. Yeah.
That's the primary concern, right? Is like when you say, because I think we started this conversation with saying I can hold it near my army. And like you say, like range control matters. And like the ATSD can just park itself and just aim shoot for the rest of the game. But the land speeder has to consider, okay, is my next compulsory move going to cause me to die?
Yep.
Essentially,
yeah,
because I've moved into a position where my entire opponent's army is shooting me now.
And I think this goes for speeder bikes too, which, even though they got a significant cost reduction, I think are still not super competitive.
No, well, you've got a bunch of tauntauns running around with max firepower pistols.
Yeah,
that's why they're not competitive.
Well, and Shores too in an Empire mirror. Like, Shores
Right.
are very capable of one-shotting full to dead a unit of speeder bikes if they catch them in the wrong spot.
Yep.
Yeah.
So because of that,
especially the coordinated fire Shores.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I don't think it's a coincidence that all of the units with a compulsory move are, not super. At least maybe, I guess, with the possible exception now, the T-47, are not super competitive.
Well, the trade-off is bad, right? They have to make a sacrifice in position, which is super critical, for ostensibly a boost in firepower, which doesn't wash.
I mean,
given what's out there.
The times that it's better are when you either do 3 moves or move and then attack.
Right.
Because there aren't other vehicles that can do those 2 things, but it's not super common because then you're really overextending yourself, right? Like if you do a move and attack with the T-47 or a speeder bike, that's like, what is that? Probably range 3 just on the moving.
Yeah.
So you're going to end up really far from where you were.
Well, move is 17 inches if you go the full distance. So that's right. It's almost
with a speeder bike base. It is with a T-47 base. It's more than that.
Oh yeah, it's way farther.
So like,
yeah.
It's nice to be able to reach out and touch something like that. But I actually played a lot of games with the T-47 when it first came out. And granted, it was more expensive, but like, I didn't run into a lot of situations where that was advantageous for me to do that, because then it's just sitting out there by itself, and it's like, shoot me.
Yeah, please shoot me. I'm already visible above the battlefield by literally everything.
Right.
Because I'm a big flying model.
And I think you can find yourself, I mean, I've done this recently with the T-47, is found myself in trouble because I was like, oh, the and I'm like, let's go. But then, I just miscalculated some distances and was like, well, now they're going to shoot it to death. Great. You know what I mean? And it's hard. The armor helped and that all helps. I think if you're going to take the T-47, you just got to be aware and just be a good pilot of that ship, and use it sparingly and use it in a way that helps you and doesn't just give you a flying target, basically.
I need you to run a comms jammer airspeeder for the giant radius.
I think that could actually be not terrible. The problem is the things that you want to jam, like the most useful things to jam are short trooper gun lines and then separatists.
Tauntauns that don't have uplinks?
Yeah, I guess tauntauns that don't have uplinks.
But I guess they have their own jammer, so you're kind of screwed usually if you do.
Yeah, although I don't think you super care if the T-47 has an order in that situation.
That's also true.
But if that's the case, like to jam something, you need to be in the middle of your opponent's force. So.
Right. So,
And it's got armor, but it still only has 7 health and white dice.
so then you bring 2 of them with ground
There you
buzzers.
go. It's only 10 points.
Then
now.
you put your arsenal 2 to use. Finally, this keyword you don't ever use.
Double airspeeder back in
There you
fashion.
go.
Let's do it.
Double air speeder, triple saboteur. Let's
Man,
go.
I so wish that it had like a forward-facing something that you could use to give it more
use
dice.
anything at all.
Just give me more than 6 dice.
Hey, does the harpoon doesn't work on creature troopers, does it?
I don't think so.
Oh God, it should.
I think it's his,
but then they don't care because reposition.
yeah, I think it's just vehicle.
Oh my God! So it's useless because well, I guess it's not useless totally if you repo it in a strange position.
Yeah,
but still, like, okay.
Yeah, it's
I just shed a tear for the Modak power harpoon.
Yeah, the harpoon is a vehicle. After a vehicle is wounded by an attack.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay against like ATSTs, I guess. But
tank blocks it 50% of the time seems good. Great investment.
You need to actually cause a wound.
Let's go.
All right. So that was a bit of an exploratory on heavies. We didn't really talk in detail about like what upgrades to take on them, or actually really in any specificity about how to run them. Maybe we can do that in a future Legion 101 section. But I think they're interesting again. Maybe not the X-34, but definitely the other 3.
Yeah, you know that jockey they released to fix it? Yeah, throw that thing in the trash.
What's that? The
Critical 1 is here. It's the cover pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah, throw that thing in the garbage. Critical 1 is here to stay.
Yep. Yeah, unfortunately. So yeah, and the difference between cover 1 and cover 2 right now is, don't get me wrong, I'd rather have cover 2 than cover 1. But if I've got a unit in heavy cover and they're in range of something dangerous, I'm not like, oh, thank God I'm in heavy cover. I'm like, oh crap, I'm in range.
Yeah, pretty much.
Exactly. Yep.
So all right. Well, let's crash this. Let's crash this plane
with no survivors.
Yeah, this T-47. If the T-47 turns out to be good, I'm gonna have to change the feature photo for my T-47 article from a crashed burning T-47 to one that's actually like in the air. All right. Well,
you guys can just read my T-47.
There you go.
It'll be fine.
They need to retcon ESB and fit those T-47s with proton torpedoes,
or just put tauntauns in the Battle of Hoth, and that shield generator wouldn't have been destroyed.
Exactly.
I've watched.
The Empire would have never made it.
I've watched that movie multiple times now, and I keep waiting for like the Tauntaun cavalry to come in and overrun the AT-ATs, and it's not happening.
Yeah, it's like
ram them.
All right. Well, we are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm David. Forgot my own name for a second.
And I'm Jay.
we will see you next week.
Ban lying in wait.
Join us next week for another episode of the Notorious Scoundrels.
This has been a 5th Trooper production.